Hey, my name's Jonathan, and I'm a veteran.
Hi, my name is Daryl, and I'm a veteran.
My name is Chad, and I'm a veteran.
Hey, I'm Travis. I'm an Air Force veteran.
Hi, my name's Ashley, and I'm a veteran.
Well, hello and happy Sunday, everybody. My name's Carolee, and you're watching Conversations with a Vet. So hopefully everybody had a great week and you're all getting reared and ready to go for Monday. Jason, thank you very much for being here and supporting me continuously. Much appreciated. I've got a wonderful guest in the wings. But before we get to that, I want to go over a couple of books that I have that you might be interested in if you haven't already picked it up. So we've got From Sailor to Backyard Cook. That's a cookbook. Richard Fleek is the author of that book. And it's a lot of quotes in here as well from his guests that he's had. He's had veterans on. He's also a veteran himself. So a lot of good recipes here from different veterans. And then we have, this is Internal Volume, and that is by Lee Allen Deckelman. You can get that on Amazon, as well as that cookbook that I just showed you. A really wonderful read, and hopefully you guys will pick that one up. And then from Jason Lee Morrison, and again, please pardon my French, it is called The Perfect Fucking Life. So that is an anthology. So a lot of great books out there. There's going to be more to come. And if you want those veteran books, also pay attention when we do hit the 500 mark, because I will have several that will be personally autographed. We're going to be doing a giveaway when we hit that 500 mark. So make sure you stay tuned for that as well. All right. So my guest is an Army veteran, and he is waiting in the wings. So please help me welcome Chris Lancia. Hello. Hello.
Hey.
So how's your Sunday going?
It's going very well. I got the excitement this morning of supporting my wife as she was doing, also a veteran, by the way, as she was doing a CrossFit competition. So, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. We'll have to get her on the show if you think she'd be up for that.
Oh, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. And it'd be interesting, especially talking, because she's been really engaged in, veterans in transition for a while, and doing things like CrossFit and volunteerism and the activities that help you continue to find that community, right? And be able to get out there and it's funny because the workout part for her, she makes it clear with the coaches that it's like, hey, listen, I'm not doing this to get the beach body. I'm doing this because I want to be able to still be flexible and like pick things up off the floor, right? And I understand how powerful that is.
Right. I know the older we get, and okay, sorry for the viewers out there, this little white, that's the sun coming in from the blind. So you see me doing one of these, that's what it's about. But yeah, the older we get, the harder things become. And I know I don't move around as much as I should. My job is sitting all day for the most part. And then, of course, doing things like this, I'm sitting. So getting out and walking, I think the majority of the time, it's when I go to the store. And then having to, get down on my haunches and pick something up. Getting back up is not as easy as it used to be. So I recognize what she's saying.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the other side of that too is there's a ton of studies in this now, but the mental health piece, of like just being active, moving around, being with other people and being active with them, right? Like there's so many things to that that's powerful for keeping this going too, right? So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. It increases the endorphins and makes you feel better. And I know I need to. I So it's on my list. I know that sounds bad. Not that I'm procrastinating, but I've got some things that I need to take care of first, and it's going to be a lot more sitting because I've got to study for something, and I am horrible with exams. So yeah, that's coming up. That's next on my list. So that'll take up
Mm,
most of my time.
yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, definitely put that out there to her and please thank her for her sacrifices. Much appreciated for all that she has done as well. And thank you. So let's talk a little bit about Killian. Hello, kid. Thank you. So both my husband Jason and my oldest son Killian are out there. So yes, indeed. Gotta stay hard, Killian. So okay, so let's go ahead and start. So, why don't you tell me a little bit about your childhood?
Okay. All right. So I guess we're gonna start at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting because I'm an Army brat. My father is also an Army veteran, but it's kind of neat because started out. I was born in Rhode Island, and he did not. He joined when I was 5 years old.
Okay.
So yeah, it's one of the things where not really born into a military family necessarily, but then grew up in one really because that was that point where you're really starting to figure things out, right? You're starting to go to school, all those sorts of things. But yeah, so bounced around as a military dependent, which is always interesting when people ask, the where you're from question. I live in Tennessee now, so I always have to preface it with like, well, just so you know, technically by birth I'm a Yankee, so so let me set some conditions here. But yeah, as growing up, we lived in Arizona, North Carolina, Germany, Florida. Yeah, kind of bounced around a little bit, and it provided some great opportunities, and it's interesting because now like our kids, both being military kids, and there's pros and cons to everything in life, right? But being a military kid, you do have the opportunity to learn some early resilience, just by some of the experiences you're going through, the constantly having to relearn where you're at and make new friends and things like that. I think the current generation, that some of those things are well, again, pros and cons, right? But it can be a little bit easier because at least you can stay in touch with friends
Right.
that back when I was growing up, it was literally pen pals, right?
I
And
was
you're
going to
like,
say a lot of letters, a lot of
yeah. And
letters.
how long are you doing that when you're like 8, right? Like,
Mhm.
whereas now you can stay in contact significantly easier. But we spent a lot of time bouncing around like that, and that led to I actually graduated high school in Germany from Bielefeld American High School.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, well, but and that again, the pros and cons, right? Great experience. However, it can be hard to get into a college coming from one of those schools, because I was an athlete, and you can't go on recruiting visits, and unless your parents are willing to pay to fly you over to do things like that. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, so it was so that led to me making that decision as well, that I was going to join the Army. It was interesting because I initially had considered the Air Force, and when I went in, and it's really funny because the Air Force still does this now. The way the Air Force does their recruiting is they have some contracts that are specific for jobs, but the bulk of their contracts are a general contract. And what happens is you take some aptitude tests, and while you're at basic, and then they say, okay, hey, here's a couple of jobs that you get to choose from based on the experience we've had with you. Whereas in the Army, it's like here's a book. You pick a number and tell us what you want to go do. And so that was kind of the thing for me with the choice there, was, well, hey, I didn't really want to go do something, like, and figure
Yeah.
it out. I wanted to be able to pick my job. And so I enlisted at 17. My parents had to sign all the permission slips, for me to go on the field trip with Uncle Sam. And and then that led to here we are now, right? So yeah, it's definitely it was an interesting experience, and I think having that experience and having our own military kids, you go into it with a different viewpoint, I think, of what they're experiencing as well, and probably a little bit higher ability to have some empathy when they're having some tough times with that
Yes.
balance.
Yes. So, were you studious? How difficult was it for you as a child in school, going from school to school and state to state?
So it's funny. I don't think there's actually a huge challenge there, personally, in terms of like, the academic side being different than someone who may not be having the moves going around. Obviously, there's some adjustment periods you're going through, and there's probably like some of the things our daughter saw, and I didn't see this as much personally, but the stuff like moving from a school system where I was taking a class in American history, for example, and I go to another school system, they don't offer that class. But we're halfway through a semester and trying to figure out what is a comparable thing that I can put you in. Actually, I say that did happen to me in high school. We moved in the middle of my junior year, and I was taking an anatomy and physiology class in Tampa, Florida. When I got to our school in Germany, there was not such an option. So the closest thing, according to the counselor, was, hey, we're going to put you in chemistry. I'm not a scientist, but there's a large difference between chemistry and anatomy and physiology, and so that was quite a struggle right there. But for me, I was also, I was the athlete growing up. So I'll be honest and say my primary role in the academic side was to just do enough to stay eligible to play sports. Which is, I don't think, an isolated thing. I believe there's plenty of people who have a similar experience in their high school academic transcript.
I would have to agree with that too. So I'm guessing, being that you played sports, you had friends. You made friends quickly wherever you were at.
Yeah, but and again, that's an interesting thing too, especially and this is something that has not changed, because I literally was having a conversation about this probably 2 weeks ago with a military mom, and her son plays baseball, and there's a yes and no. Yes, you can get in there and be able to immediately connect with people who share a similar interest to you, like we use baseball, for example. The backside of that is, even if you're, a future pro athlete, when you step in there, you're breaking into a spot where, hey, you're going to potentially take Jimmy's spot in his role, right? And Jimmy's friends with all the other kids on the team. And so that actually adds a lot of complexity to it, because now, yes, you can make some friends on the team, but there's going to be some that don't like you because you're stepping in and potentially taking away an opportunity for one of their buddies, right? So there's really it's a very tough dynamic for military kids doing that. And what it leads to sometimes, in this particular instance with this military mom I was talking to, her son has made comments along the lines of, hey, I don't want to play baseball anymore. Right. But it's something where he's like, I think he's 11 or 12, and he's played baseball the bulk of his life. He loves it. But because of that thing where he feels like sometimes he's not viewed positively when he shows up to a place, it's made him have that in his head that, like, maybe I don't want to do this thing anymore. Right. And so that's kind of, it crushes your heart a little bit, right? To see, a kid at 11 or 12 having to with that kind of, sense of, I guess, rejection in a little bit, is it? But but to your point, like, you absolutely, when you jump in there like that, there is a ready, set, group of friends that you can jump into, and have that opportunity that I think if you were someone that was, really strong academically, but didn't do any other, extracurricular activities, you probably don't have the same opportunity to immediately jump in and have something that's in common with people, and you can form a group of friends.
Yeah, you have to really work hard to make those friends. And yeah, I can't imagine how it would be moving from place to place to place. I've moved from one state to another, but I was an adult, so I get it. But I know when we moved here, that it initially was difficult for the boys, for our kids, because they had a set of friends, and it was a very small town that we moved from to a very big city. And but they made it through. They worked it out and made their own friends again and still in contact with their old friends. So
Yeah.
they're resilient. Yeah, absolutely. So so you joined the army. When you decided to do that, what did your parents say?
My parents were 100% on board with it. They never questioned it. I think, part of that too was like many military families. I think we often see, that our children have noticed how important that thing is to us, and that military service, the being part of something bigger than yourself. And as with many things in life, the things that are important to the parents kind of imprint a little bit, onto the kids. So my parents were supportive of it. I think my mom's biggest concern was just literally like the age thing more than anything. She's like, all right, so you're not even 18 yet, and I'm going to send you off to, to big bad Uncle Sam. Like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this decision. But they were in the conversation. I think that's a large part of it too, is, having the parental participation in that conversation. I think if I had just shown up one day, hey, I've already signed all these papers and I'm doing this thing and I'll be gone in 2 weeks, probably would have been a much different reception than I'm thinking about this. I'd like to have your advice on, how to pursue this and what, what questions I should be asking, what I should be thinking about
Right.
while I'm looking at this. And so because we did it like that, I think that really helped with them, and the support of it. And honestly, I think the side of that too is they also acknowledged the whole, like going to college thing and the difficulty of doing that from an overseas location as a military kid, and the challenges there. And, I think collectively we saw this as a better option than trying to do community college and, work at the PX on post,
Right.
and, not saying there's anything wrong with that, right? But it just wasn't the right fit for me. I think we recognize that as a family.
Yeah. Yeah. And you make really valid points. I know our middle child, when he was looking at going into the military, he'd known that it was something he wanted to do. And we'd had the conversation all the way back since he'd been like 10 or 11.
Wow.
So I definitely knew. Now, the branch that he chose was a little different than what he initially had wanted. Um, but that's what happens when the branch doesn't answer the phone. So,
Well, it's true. Yeah.
but yeah. So, um, tell me, as far as basic training goes, how was that for you? Obviously, you were athletic, so probably not very difficult when it came to the fitness side of things.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because there's also a culture shock component to the basic training piece, by design, right? Because they
Right.
really are, they need to get you in the mindset to be able to, to be on a team and do the things they need you to do. Accept some things personally, like be able to recognize you have limitations, but things like that. But I think that part wasn't quite as difficult either, but also coming from the military family, right? So something that would seem relatively as simple as knowing, ranks, because that's one of the very first things they do is they give you the book and,
Mhm.
there's tests on it. And like, you have to be able to identify, okay, three chevrons in a rocker is the staff sergeant, right? But you got to be able to like, look at those and know that. And if you've never been around the military, that's a steep learning curve, especially when you're also dealing with all the stress of being in basic training, right? So there was that wasn't, quite as bad for me. But I think that the biggest thing was being able to just jump in there and honestly help other people. And I think that's something that for a lot of us, that's part of it too. We can oftentimes make our own path a little bit easier because we remove some of the stress, for us by helping someone else with
Eh,
their stress. And it's kind of this, give and take that that is often, a symbiotic kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And so I think that was part of it. I was able, because I did have the experience of coming from a military family, I was able to help other people with stuff like, hey, this is how you recognize these ranks, right? Or this is why this is important. And by doing that, it made me think less about some of the things that probably I was going to struggle with.
Yeah. But in the same regard, obviously, the more your platoon or battalion know, the less you're going to be slayed, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So it definitely makes a difference. And it's great that you had that background and that knowledge. I'm going to guess, did you go through those with your dad when he was in the military and say, okay, quiz me on these?
I didn't actually, but I think it's just because I'd been around him so much in the unit that you just kind of you naturally learn those. It's kind of amazing the level of knowledge that the average military child has on things like that. Even something as simple as, and you'll see it sometimes on social media where the reveille will occur, whatever, but you'll see military kids stop, right? But their
Yep.
friends that are not military kids are like, "What are you doing?" Like, "Hey, right now you stop, you pay reverence to the flag, you put your hand over your heart," and it's just like a thing that they know to do because that's how they live it, right? And I think it's the same thing with that. It's something that we didn't quiz, you didn't quiz me, we didn't go over it, but because I've been around it so much, the bulk of those were kind of ingrained in here
Yeah.
because I knew. And I think the backside of that too is because then dad also would make the corrections. You're like, "Oh, so and so was this." He's like, "No, listen, if you're going to talk about that person, like you're going to do it right. This is what their rank is. This is what their role is, right? Like, and set the conditions to that he has a professionalism that he expects out of you as well because it's what he does for a living. It's really important to him."
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. DJ, welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Appreciate you and your continuous support. DJ's been with me also from day one. Great guy. So, okay. So, as far as boot camp goes or basic training, what kind of funny stories can you recall? Anything that just makes you laugh thinking back?
Well, so yeah, I think, and honestly, for basic, most of the times we probably have more of the stories that make you go than make you laugh. But I will say that one, and this is for some reason this just popped in my head. But so you're cut off from candy and like alcohol and soda generally, because even at the chow hall, while they have a soda machine, the expectation is trainee, right? You're drinking water, you're drinking juice, you're drinking milk, because you're going to go through some really physical stuff, and they're trying to make sure that you're fueling your body right. But you do occasionally get the chance to go to this little shop and it's to pick up toiletries more than anything, right? So we're doing the shampoos and deodorants, but you can also get, hey, I'm gonna grab some cough drops. So it's interesting how many people will pick up cough drops that have certain components in them because they're like, this is the closest thing I can get to some sort of an alcohol is by what's in this cough drop or
Oh,
this
wow.
cough syrup or whatever the case may be. And it's really funny because then when you're in there, they're like, I'm getting one over. You're like, yeah, because the drill sergeants haven't ever figured out that that's what's in
Right?
cough syrup.
And I don't know what they call it in the army, but like a welfare check where they come through and they dump everything in the middle
Yes.
of the room and yeah, looking for any kind of contraband or
Oh yeah, and you'd have guys that would get, mom or their girlfriend or would send, a Tupperware thing of cookies or whatever, right? And that wasn't something like they would dump out, but it was one of the things where the drill sergeants would make, if you got a box, they would, make you open it in front of them because they were looking for the contraband thing. Easier to catch it on the front end than,
right.
try and give you a chance to hide it, whatever. But then it was some things like, okay, well, I'm not going to make you dump those in the trash, but you are going to share them with your friends. So you got 20 cookies. Guess what? Pick out 19 other people, actually 18 because the drill sergeant gets one too, right? Like we're going to dispose of these cookies right now.
That's right. That's right. Jim, thank you. Appreciate you being here tonight. So I know in the Marine Corps that for boot camp, they are not allowed anything sent to them. And if they are, it's only when the instructor tells them, and it has to be enough for the entire platoon. So, and the only thing that they can get when they are allowed are cough drops from all the screaming and the protein bars, but they had to be like, I don't know, 20% or better worth of protein. And they only got those. I mean, they got held by the instructors and they only got them when they did well. So, but you sent anything else. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Rich, welcome. Welcome. Rich LaMonica is out there in the chats. So yeah, it's interesting that how the different branches are. And I know that, or at least it's my understanding, the Army, it has loosened, like they now are allowing recruits to have their cell phones.
Yeah, my understanding that is it's very limited. Like it'll be for an hour on a Sunday or something like that.
Yeah, they get them on Sundays, is what I heard too.
Get locked back up afterwards, so you don't have them during the week. And I mean, it's funny because I know in today's society, the cell phone's an integral part of everything, basically. But when you're in that environment, you can't have the distraction.
Right.
If I'm going to take you out and I'm going to teach you how to operate a weapon, and a lot of those kids have never touched one before in their lives. Right. And it's like, I need you 100% focused on this thing I'm about to teach you how to use that could quite literally kill someone if you're not paying attention. I don't need you worried about what your pockets dinging because somebody made a comment on an Instagram post, right? I need you paying attention to this daggone rifle so you don't kill yourself or someone else, right? And so I think that's the part of it that a lot of people don't connect that piece, like, oh, you're taking away something important. And I'm like, well, no, actually, what I'm trying to do is make sure that they're focused on this thing that's really dangerous. All right. And that's what I need them focused on right now. And they can get back to Facebook and Instagram later, but if they screw this up, they or someone else may not, because they might do something that, significantly injures or kills someone. Yep.
And I know, well, when my middle went through boot camp, they couldn't even take their cell phones. And if they did, they had to hand them over, and they didn't get them until, I think they got them Family Day, which is the day of graduation, and 13 weeks of nothing, pen to paper, if they were writing a letter. And a lot of times the instructors made them write a letter.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. And I know, I guess it's an assumption of mine, and I could be completely off base, that one of the reasons why they're allowing for that is to help improve their numbers with the younger generation. And it may be working. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I think that's part of it. And honestly, it's something that the Department of Defense as a whole is really struggling with right now, is what standards can we change, right, to allow a new generation to look at things. And it's funny because when you talk to someone like, oh, back in my day, but if you look back 50, 60 years ago, right, things changed every 10 to 20 years, with small changes here and there and what they allowed, what they could do. And so it's honestly not something that's like just suddenly the military's decided to drop all their standards, right? But some people want to try and paint it that way. It's like, no, we're going, hey, there's certain things that, like that kid, that's something that there's a withdrawal piece to that, because the cell phone and all the inputs that come from it, right, can become somewhat of an addictive thing, right? Yep. And so, we have to find ways to do that, just like you wouldn't do with someone who's having an alcohol or drug problem. You wouldn't just yank it away from them. There's techniques, right, to help them get past that thing, and so it's interesting to see. But you're right, that's a part of it. I mean, there's a thing right now. I got my sweet beard going here, but there's a huge thing right now in the Army about the beard thing, and is
it facial hair in general or just the beard?
So the beard is the topic of conversation, because you've always been allowed to have a mustache.
Okay.
And you've always been allowed to have, like the sideburns down to the lowest outer opening of the ear, right? So you'll see some guys that like literally they put their little clippers right there and they get it exactly on the edge. But for some reason, the beard has become the big topic of conversation. Does that impact the recruiting piece? I don't know, right? But it's a standard that the Army is looking at. Is it something that's worth changing in order to, for lack of a better term, catch up with the times, right? And say, hey, this is something that that maybe the younger generation does find important. Is somebody not joining the Army or the Marines or anything because they don't have a beard? I don't know. I wouldn't think so, but who knows, right? Yeah.
I know the Marine Corps, excuse me, loosened up their regulations somewhat when it came to tattoos.
Yeah.
And so they made it, certain regulations. Okay, you can have the sleeve, but it's got to be, so far from your wrist or what have you. I don't know. But
Yeah. Well, it's
go
funny.
ahead.
So I guess it's been 10 or 12 years now. So the Marine Corps had put out a message that said, hey, as of this date, you're going to document the lowest tattoo on your arm and in relation to, the wrist.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you cannot get another tattoo below that once we document it. So every tattoo parlor around a Marine Corps installation suddenly had Marines coming in, and they were getting a little bar tattooed on their wrist. So that way, when you document it, like, that's my lowest tattoo. So I'm going to finish my sleeve because this is my lowest tattoo.
Oh
I
my
tell you what,
gosh.
hey, no matter what service you're in, we're very good at finding the gray areas.
That's right. That's right. You learn to adapt. Jason says facial hair does not allow the masks to seal properly. And so that might be why there's an issue with that.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because that's it's been somewhat debunked that the seal doesn't happen on there. There's been so many people do YouTube videos. It's been wild. There's people on both sides of that. What's very interesting is about a week ago there was a whole thread on this on Army WTF moments. And one of the things that caught fire was a commenter that said, okay, well, if the whole reason I can't have a beard is because my mask won't seal, how come I don't have to carry my mask with me 24 hours a day? Right? If I only carry my mask at certain times, then why can't? So it's just interesting. Like, it opened this whole can of worms where people are like, wait a minute, hey, if I'm deploying, hey, when you're on deployment, you got to be clean shaven. Okay, cool. Why can't I have it in garrison, right? So it opened this whole can of worms with people that have that conversation. One of which was somebody going, hey, be careful what you ask for, because they're going to give you a daggone gas mask and make you wear it all the time.
There's some truth there. And so you've made it through basic training, and then you went to your PDS.
Yeah, well, for me, it was so for the Army, once you do basic, you go to what we call advanced individual training. And so that's your first school to really learn. I'm going to keep talking. So, I see you. I saw you went off for a sec. I think something went down the wrong tube.
Okay.
I stopped for a second. I wasn't sure how bad this was getting for you.
A tickle in my throat.
Ooh. And
Go ahead.
Those, you never know where it's going, right? You never know. It's like, okay, so a little something, or if I'm going to go into a full-blooded coughing fit, right? You're like,
I know. So continue, please.
So for the Army, our next step after basic is what we call advanced individual training. And that's where you learn. So basic is getting you the base I need for you to be a soldier in the Army. And then AIT is where I teach you how to do your job, right? And that's going to be a base level understanding how to do your job, with the knowledge that once you get to your unit, then you're going to get the OJT to actually really learn how to do it. But at least you have a knowledge base to go from. And so for me, that was at Fort Eustis, Virginia, which is this, it was a sleepy little post. Now it's got the training and doctrine command for the Army there. But when I went through, it was this little kind of thing. It was just a bunch of trainees there. There was one active unit that could, deploy and stuff. But yeah, it was, we were there for, it was about 6 months for that training, and every job's a little bit different. Some ones that are more involved than others, with some of the technical stuff, have different lengths of time. So that one being a lot of technical, because working on repairing helicopters, it was It's a pretty in-depth one. Spent a lot of time there. But it's interesting because you go through phases there. And so when you first show up, it's similar to the basic training experience where, hey, you're still locked down. You're basically going from get up in the morning, do PT, eat, go to class, eat, go to class, come back, go to your room, close it down for the night. And then as you go through your phases, you earn more privilege and freedom, if you will, right? And so when you're in, like whatever level they want to call it, they usually do it with colors, but when you're in that next level, like, okay, maybe now, after dinner, you get some time, you can put on civilian clothes and you can go play basketball at the gym or go to the PX or whatever. And then in that last phase, maybe now you have the ability to go to the mall on the weekends or, something like that. So it's like they're slowly giving you your freedom back.
Yeah. It takes a bit. And so once you got through the AIT, then where did you go?
My first duty station was the land of the frozen tundra in Fort Drum, New York.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I showed up, talk about a culture shock as a, kid who'd never been that far north for long. I showed up in late April. And so when I reported, I get to the replacements the company. It's kind of like sweater, light jacket weather. Not too bad. I woke up about 4:35 in the morning, freezing in my barracks room, and I look out the window, and all I can see is white.
Oh wow!
And it had dropped. I think it was about 8 inches of snow overnight. And again, mind you, this is almost May, right? So I'm like, I didn't know it snowed in places in like the end of April, beginning of May.
Keep talking. I will be right back.
Okay. Yeah. I learned quickly about the power of the lake effect storm, coming out of there. So Fort Drum's a place where you hear little funny sayings where people say things like, hey, they sent soldiers down from Alaska to Fort Drum to actually go through their winter training. And you think that's a joke until you get there and find out that there is a little bit of that going on, just based on how things go. And the culture shock piece there too is, so let's see, it was the first full winter there. So that next winter we went, friends of mine says, hey, let's go watch these snowmobile races in a town that was about 35, 40 minutes away. So we drive up there. As we're approaching the site of the races, I'm looking and I'm seeing 18-wheelers, and they appear to be parked on the ice. And I'm thinking, there's no possible way they have these parked on the ice, and not one, but 10. And so it took some time to realize that the ice was frozen thick enough to park 18-wheelers on it and to do snowmobile races on the ice with studded tracks and everything else. So that takes a little time to process when you've never been in that environment and you're trying to figure out what you're looking at. You're in the mute.
How about now?
There you go.
I'm talking about
like the old school Zoom call, like you never know if you press the button enough times.
You're muted. I would say that's got to be really thick ice for 18-wheelers to be sitting on there. So sorry about that. That little tickle, like you said, you just don't know when it's coming. So, but okay. So it was very, very cold, obviously. And did you get to partake in the races?
No, you just get to watch. I'm sure we had guys that did stuff like that, because we had some folks in our unit that they would go out and ride snowmobiles on the weekends, things like that. We were just going to watch. But it's interesting because that whole area, so summer up there, it never really gets much above the mid to high 80s. And so the Great Lakes there, specifically Lake Ontario, like it unfreezes, if you will, but the water never gets, I'd say maybe in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
So so it stays pretty cold. So when the winter sets in, you repeat the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Freeze it again.
And how long were you there for?
About 2 years. And I went from there to Germany.
And that was a place you're familiar with.
It was, yeah, yeah. So going back there, I had been there twice as a dependent. So, it really going back and feeling. And when I went back that time, my father was still stationed over there because he was just closing out his career. So that was kind of interesting to be there and him still be on active duty, be so close. And that's also where I met my wife. So, obviously big benefits to going to Germany.
Right. I'd say. And so, were you able to serve, I mean, like be there with your dad, the same base, and did you guys work together?
No, so we were in different places. My dad was a military intelligence guy. He would always make the jokes about the oxymoron involved in that. But yeah, that's what his job was. I was a Black Hawk crew chief at that point. However, we did deploy once, which was kind of cool because his unit would oftentimes come to our deployed location. We had a regular rotation going into Turkey for what was called Operation Provide Comfort. So Operation Provide Comfort had started out after the Gulf War as a relief mission, taking food, medical supplies, and stuff to generally the Kurds, but the people of Iraq, above the, I think it's 36th Pro 37, but into northern Iraq and support them. And what it eventually developed to was a little bit less of that humanitarian part, but continued mission of being able to go in there and really check on them and do the welfare checks. And so we would fly special forces teams in there, and it'd be doing a little bit of intelligence collection, just asking like, hey, have you seen anything that's not supposed to be here up here, and help out that way. But then the medics would set up, and every village we went to, they were doing medical care, treating wounds, just whatever it was. They'd bring their aid bags and basically come back with them empty, having provided that medical aid. That most of those villages have no access to that sort of thing. But my dad, as he would come in and do the intel part with some of the stuff with our guys. So we had one rotation where we were able to be there at the same time, which is pretty cool. And it was always interesting because when it was probably my first deployment as a part of that. One of the guys was like, wait a minute, Lancia, it's not a common name. Like, it's like your uncle or your brother or so. I was like, no, it's my dad. Like, what?
Yeah, I'm sure that was kind of a shock for a lot of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And by this time, your dad, what was his rank?
He was a staff sergeant. He retired as a staff sergeant.
Okay.
And so it was one of those roles, and we have a lot of them in the Army where they kind of, there's such a pyramid in terms of how they're set up. Like we had a ton of junior enlisted roles, but then as they start going up the pyramid, they become really quickly, shortened. And so that was one of those jobs in the MI field where they're just, you reach that staff sergeant part and, it's really hard to keep going because they didn't have many slots. And so if someone else had been promoted and they weren't getting out of the Army anytime soon, you may be in that role for a little bit because we need someone else to vacate a slot to give you one. So it was kind of, and he had the thing that actually I've heard this happen to a lot of people. Once he decided to retire, someone had called him and been like, hey, so, it looks really good for you to get promoted next year if you want to stay. He's like, I'm not falling for that.
Right. Because once you sign, that's another however many years. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, I really appreciate it, but I'm good.
And you said you were a Black Hawk crew chief?
Yeah.
Did I hear that right? Okay.
Yeah.
And did you like the Black Hawk?
Oh yeah. And honestly, one of you hear the old school, best job I ever had kind of thing, quoting, but it was an incredible opportunity. And I think when we start talking about things like military transition, right, jobs like that are ones that you really come away with a very marketable skill, especially if you go and you take the next step and you go get like your AMP certification. You walking in the door with that certification, which is what that civilian company needs in order for you to do the job, but bringing all the intangibles and the soft skills that you picked up, it's night and day. They'll hire you in a second. And so that was one of those ones where a job like that opens so many doors for you, no matter what you choose to do as you continue your career. But it also is one of those ones where it it's just a cool job. I mean, you're working on helicopters, you're flying around places, you're picking up artillery pieces and trucks, under big ropes underneath your helicopter, right, and like carrying them around, and and you will see it. You'd see someone that had a different job, and like you're flying by, and I wish I was, maybe that you could see like the look in the eye of, I wish I were there, not here. Like,
yeah.
And I return that with a look of, I don't wish that, because I really like what I'm doing.
Right. Exactly right. So did you fly them as well?
No, I never. It was interesting because, and it's gone through a bunch of different things over the years. But for me, ICE was one, because there was a long time where to become a warrant officer, you had to have 20/20, right? You couldn't wear glasses. You couldn't have had LASIK. You couldn't have. And we've changed that over the years, in a large part because of staffing and being able to continue to get people to do those jobs. But when I was looking at it in the the mid to late 90s, there were no waivers for that. It was if you were 20/20 and qualified, or you weren't, and that was it. And so I wasn't, and it was like, okay. And so I mean, it's a dream that you kind of have taken away, but that's okay. I mean, in all honesty, as a crew chief, while you're not flying it, the roles in an aircraft, the way the roles work, it's such a team effort, and it's one of those things where, the two people up front are flying the aircraft, but everything from the back of their seats to the very tip back of the aircraft belongs to the crew members in the back, right? And so, there's so much responsibility that is given in there, and so much trust.
Yes.
And there'd be little things too that, and I think for most pilots, it's this understanding that, hey, we're all in this together, right? And so if you don't do your part and I don't do my part, like, it has to be, we have to be working together as a team for all these things to work. And you'd even see some of them come out and, help out with some of the routine inspections and stuff like that, just because they wanted to continue to show that support and make sure that you knew that, hey, we're a team, wasn't just, a clever phrase, that they really wanted to work together with you.
Yeah. And I've talked with several pilots. They were pilots in the military, and 100%, they absolutely, if their crew said the plane or the helicopter or what have you was good to go, they knew without a doubt it was good to go.
Yeah.
There was like no second guessing.
Yeah. And the crew members take a lot of pride in that. Like on the Army side, only the pilot can do the pre-flight. Right now, the Air Force, like, they've got some stuff with some of their enlisted guys, where certain components of pre-flight that the crew members can do, but for the Army, it's only the pilot that can do it.
Yeah.
But when that pilot walks out to the aircraft, right, like, the pride comes into every single panel that needs to be open is open. All the covers are not just taken off, but they're put away properly, right? Like, everything's stowed the way it's supposed to be stowed. The windows have been clean, like, it's all to that point. And they know, and it's interesting because the pilots know too, which of the crew chiefs take that really seriously. And, and it becomes almost a thing of like, well, I want that person, I want to fly on his aircraft, right? Because I know that he or she doesn't play around. Right. And so they understand that part too. But yeah, it's really interesting to see that level of respect that comes from the pilots based on how, professional you are at your job as well. And their understanding of the fact that, back to that thing of, hey, this all has to work together or we're going to have a really bad day.
That's exactly right. And now, so with the Black Hawk, is that the only helicopter that you worked on? Are you able to take care of?
So you can do some courses. When I got to Fort Belvoir, we still had some old Hueys around, and they were the shiny green and white ones that were used to fly around general officers and some junior members of Congress. And so we were able to do a little bit with them. And then at Fort Drum, when I was first there, I was in it's a depot maintenance unit. So it's a lot of high level maintenance. So some of those, there are certain tasks that you can help with, because there are some things that you need to be certified to do certain things, but there's a lot of stuff like, hey, can you help me, put this rotor blade back on? Okay. It doesn't really matter which airframe you're on. You can help with the physical labor of doing
Right,
that,
right.
that
The
task.
muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you get to learn a lot with that too. Because when I was at Drum, we still had some Cobras. We had some, obviously the Blackhawks, and then there's different variants. Like the Medevac Blackhawk is way different than the utility Blackhawk. It's got different equipment inside. Some different, way things are put in there in order to account for some of the equipment. So even little things like that, where it's the same aircraft, but it's an entirely different airframe in the way it's put together.
Yeah, yeah, and I can imagine different weights too that
Yeah.
each one's able to carry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense. So how long were you in Germany then when you were deployed?
So it's funny. I think out of a 3-year period, I was out of the country. I think we did the math one time. It was like 25, 26 months of 36 that we
Oh,
were out
wow.
somewhere else. Yeah. And
Okay.
this was pre 9/11. It's just, we had that routine deployment down to Turkey, but then we did a lot of time, on training missions. We got to Albania, Italy, obviously different places in Germany, and go around. And a lot of it was the multinational kind of training environment, stuff like that. So yeah, it was very interesting to be able to do that. But it's funny too, because in aviation, life can be a little bit easier than some of some of the other
I've heard
jobs
that
out there.
rumor.
Yeah, well, and it's because things like certain aircraft, we had some variants of the aircraft that they couldn't park in a field because they had antennas and stuff on the bottom, so they had to be in a hard stand. So therefore, you're probably staying in a barracks building on the post and not in a tent on a cot, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's definitely some wins there.
So you've been to a lot of countries. What was your favorite?
Oof, that's a tough one. Um, I mean, honestly, I think that's probably part of the tough part with a lot of the recent deployments is that our service members, the only experience they had with natives of that country were combat, right? And so your opinion of that country is there based on the fact that someone who is a resident of that country tried to kill you, right? So
Right. Yeah.
that will color your opinion a little bit. But being in the training pipeline was so interesting because we really got to work with a lot of those folks and talk to them. Like even Albania, we get to talk with a lot of the Albanian troops down there, and they were just coming out of a Soviet bloc kind of country and really trying to get more engaged with NATO, and this was pre-European Union, but being able to talk to them about some of their experiences, and just get to learn from each other. It was really cool. But if I think I just had to pick a favorite. I mean, honestly, I think I'd be split. Turkey was amazing. It
Yeah.
was a really amazing, and the troops we got to work with there were amazing as well. But we also got to do some stuff in the Netherlands, and that was really, really interesting because they have some very interesting. They have conscription, so some of the folks you talk to, they're serving because that's part of living there, isn't it? And but just hearing some of their stories and some of the traditions they did. If you like military history at all, being able to have those conversations is just awesome because you get to learn so much about the way that other nations' militaries view some things that sometimes we see differently or we take for granted or whatever the case may be. And so being able to just hear their stories and get the perspective that goes, wow, I never thought of it like that, but that's really cool, right? Like it was a lot of fun.
And so like, did you eat the food in Albania while you were there?
We had a very little bit of it because we were on a like lockdown on a installation. So we had just a little bit, but in Turkey, we got to eat a lot on the economy, and so it was very cool. And even stuff like some of our liaisons would take us over to their dining facilities, and so the first time you have real baklava and realize that the way it's made over there, one bite and you probably should go see your dentist.
Right.
But the first time you ever tasted that, you're like, holy cow, that's
A
sweet.
lot of syrup and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's other things too. Like you'll drive through, and this isn't isolated to Turkey, but a lot of Middle Eastern countries, you go past like a butcher shop, and there'll be a block of meat hanging in the window, and it hits you that you're like, that's not refrigerated.
That's right.
I don't know if I want to eat that.
But they're all alive, right?
I mean, yeah.
So it's interesting the the different cultures in
Yeah.
that regard and how they all survived. And it's kind of like us back in the day, right? No seatbelt laws, and every gosh, I remember as a kid being piled in the back of a station wagon with
Oh yeah.
3 4 other little kids, and no car seats.
That old Town and
Please.
Country where you're looking out the back window,
Yes.
like riding
Yes.
backwards for most of your life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we all survived it, right?
Yeah.
So,
You drink out of water hose, it's fine.
100%. Sometimes that is the best water, I'm telling you, especially on a hot day. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But you learn quickly to let it run for a second.
You do. You do.
You
But
only make the mistake of drinking the 150-degree water that's trapped in the hose once.
usually for us, the hose was like in a shaded area, so it wasn't as bad. So you'd be able to just crank that puppy on, and at least it'd get cold as it went on, but drained out. But so Killian had said, where did that go? I'd asked about where you had said, I clarified the Black Hawk crew chief, and he said that it explains why your AIT was so long.
Yep.
And then, so this one, interesting. So this is Jim, and he said he knows Germany's huge, but he had a high school friend there for several deployments. And did you ever meet Mitchell West? He was an IED division leader.
No, I didn't. Yeah,
All right.
it's always interesting though. It's funny that we acknowledge, I think as a community, right? That like, hey, there's probably a really little chance, but I'm still going to ask, right?
Oh yeah.
Because you never know, and it is like the military is small. It's actually somewhat surprising how often you ask that question and someone goes, "Oh yeah, I know
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
person."
Yeah. Jim asks. There's a couple of them. I think it's Mitchell West and Jennifer. I can't think of her name. You'll have to remind me there, Jim. Put that out in the chats for me. So I'm going to ask a question on behalf of my kid.
Yeah.
While you were deployed and going through like the training exercises and such, did you ever have an opportunity to work with the Marines?
We did. Actually, we worked with the aviation side of Marine a lot, which is, again, talking about different perspectives. It was so interesting to talk to Marine, specifically enlisted aviation Marines, and about the way that, just their training goes, because they don't generally sign up for that job. You sign up to be an infantryman or a tank crewman or something. And then, after you do that a little bit, you get the opportunity to pursue some of the other things the Marine Corps does,
Right.
because the Marines, speaking of standards, and like we were talking earlier, there's certain things, and if you're going to be a Marine, you understand that your primary job is to be a Marine, and that means stand the line, and and defending things.
Every
But
Marine is a rifleman first.
yeah. So, but when we got to work with them, it was so cool because they had, so when we were in Germany, they had the CH-46 ran into a couple times. And so these were like the little brother to the Chinook aircraft that the Army has.
Oh, okay.
But when you get talking to the Marines on there, and one of them, he pulled out his logbook to show us, he was flying an aircraft that was made in like 67, 68, something like that. And the aircraft was, significantly older than the Marines that were manning it. And so, you look at that and you're like, wow, because we didn't have that, because the Blackhawks were the oldest Blackhawk is, late 70s, early 80s. And so looking at that, you're like, holy cow, that's wild. But then just talking to them about things like landing on ships, right? And like just what an experience that is that most Army aviation folks never, go through. But yeah, it was interesting doing that. And then later in my career, when I was a logistics guy, we worked heavily. This is at Fort Greg Adams in Virginia, but they have a whole Marine Corps detachment there who are going through all the logistics training. So we get to work with them a lot.
Nice. Okay, so Jim says the other is Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer McAfee.
No, don't know that one either.
There you go. And then Killian giving me grief. Every Marine's a rifleman. That's him. That's him. So, yeah, you don't have to worry about that anymore, Killian. And then, so he also said that there was an IED division leader that he's got some choice words for that person. So, yeah, Killian, get with Jim on that, and I'm sure he'll hook you up. So when did you retire? Love you too, kid.
Literally, well, I guess 6 weeks or so now. So it was April 1st was my last day on active duty.
April 1st. And
Yeah.
were you worried they were going to come back and say April Fools?
So it's funny is one, no, I wasn't worried about that, but we did a video because my wife and I do a lot of video work, and so we did a April Fool's Day did it. So I had the beard, and because I'd been on terminal leave at that point for almost 2 months after my retirement ceremony, so I'd grown the beard out and everything. But I actually I put on my my OCP top and like did this whole thing about, hey, so I'm sure you heard about the retiree recall thing that the Army's doing right now, and I guess I got wrapped in that, and I thought I was retired, but apparently I'm not, right? And then we did like okay, by the way, April Fools, just kidding, like this is it, we're all done.
Yeah.
As soon as I got that date, my wife immediately said, oh, we have got to do something with this.
Yes, agreed. And congratulations, by the way. So that's awesome. So what have you, I guess I should say, what were you given as far as resources for transitioning to civilian life when you left the Army? Did they provide any resources for you?
Well, and it's interesting. So the Army and all the services have the congressionally mandated piece of doing the transition assistance. The problem with that is that it's a one size fits all. And people like to beat up the folks that are doing it. But I always like to remind folks, they have an impossible mission. So if you look at the transition assistance program, no matter what service you're in, it has to be delivered to someone who's getting out after 4 months of service because they had, something negative, or they had a medical issue or whatever. And someone is getting out after 34 years of service and is a fairly senior individual, right? Like, you're supposed to deliver this same thing to both of those people, and it's not possible to do so. Right. So what I've done, I've been fortunate since, I guess probably since around 2011 or 12, I started doing a lot of volunteer work with veteran service organizations, in my free time. And so that led into the resource piece that I needed, was that understanding that, hey, you know what, the DoD is only going to be able to provide so much, and being able to get outside of that and find some of that on your own is very helpful. And there's a lot of organizations out there right now that are helping with that their transition piece specifically, and that resource part, and trying to get proactive. But the one thing that I always bring up with service members when I talk to them is, hey, relationships are a huge part of this. And it's something that we don't talk about. It's not brought up in the transition program. Everything is drop a resume, do the crosswalk on what your job was to what you could do on the outside. But they don't ever talk about the fact that, depending on what survey you look at, about 7 out of every 10 jobs in America are filled by knowing someone.
Right.
And so, but we don't do a good job of building relationships outside of people that are wearing a uniform. So when it comes time to get out, whether I did 4 years or 24 years, the people that I know generally are all still in uniform, or they just took their uniform off recently and in the same boat as me. And I don't have a lot of people that I can talk to and get into the conversations about what opportunities they might have. And so that's where some of these ones, like I know I worked with the Commit Foundation, which is a nonprofit that does a lot of personalized transition coaching. In the state of Tennessee, we do a lot of work with the Honor Foundation, which is it's specifically focused on special operations forces, regardless of branch, but they're also starting to do a little bit more as their team grows with some conventional folks as well. But those two organizations are just examples of many that are out there of providing that personalized experience and really helping you find those resources that you need, because for every single one of us, it's going to be a little bit different. some of us might need education stuff. Some of us might need, the mental health stuff or a mentorship. Some of us might need like a day in the life of kind of experience with someone in industry we're interested in, but that's where that power is that individualized experience. And there's a lot of nonprofits that do a really good job of providing that. And the DoD just won't ever be able to.
Right. I'm pulling these up here and we're going to get them put out in a banner, and then I'll also get them put in a chat. So let's start with okay, so there's the Commit Foundation. I'm going to go ahead and get that put in the comments as well. Do you know where are they located?
So how they know? I think their home base is actually in Montana.
Bozeman, I think. Okay,
yeah.
making sure I saw the right one. So very familiar with Bozeman. So actually, that's where we're from.
Okay.
So is Montana. So yeah, pretty neat. And have you been?
No. And it's actually their team is spread across the country. And so they do a really good job of meeting the veterans where they are. And so, they do it all virtually to help you out. And the way their process works is they have an intake kind of thing where you go in, you fill out some information on kind of your background, what you need, stuff like that. They'll have a transition coach chat with you and really help shape the journey. And then what they do is they have an online program you go through that is designed to strip away all of the distractors, we'll say, in your transition experience, right? And look at this and go, hey, what do you actually need? And kind of the way I always phrase it is it helps you identify if money was no issue, location no issue, like what would get me out of bed every day for the rest of my life and go, hey, I'm looking forward to going and doing this thing. Right. And they help strip all that down. There's components of it that are also tied for your spouse if you're married to be a part of the conversation too, because I think most of us discount how much our spouses know about us and, and what's important to us. So having that part of the conversation as well. And then you have a coach who meets with you on a regular basis to talk through the things you're experiencing and answering in the online portion of it. And really, again, personalize it more, but help shape that journey and provide you some perspective as to what you're looking at. And then they'll go and they'll do events in places like they've done in the last 2 years. They've done one each year in Nashville here in Tennessee. And so they bring veterans in. It's generally people that can be kind of in this geographic area, but if you're considering this area, they invite you to come too, right? Like, because they really want you to be there and actually meet some folks who are in different fields in that area and get some coaching from them. And it's back to relationships, right? Being able to start forming those as well.
Network, yeah.
Yep.
And meeting them and finding your tribe.
100%.
As they say. So the Commit Foundation, how did you hear about them?
Oddly enough, I'm a Bush scholar. I had to go through the Bush Veteran Leadership Program in 2021, and one of my classmates is actually I think she's their chief operating officer, but she works for them, and so we had a lot of conversations because I knew I was coming towards retirement, and she was talking about what they did, and that kind of led to me going, okay, well, when it was time, I need to definitely reach out and figure out if this can help me, and 100% it did. It did a lot of that. Again, stripping that stuff down and helping me figure out what was important to me as I was trying to figure out what the next chapter was going to look like. I'd say important to me, but important to my family, as we start figuring out what's the next chapter need to look like for us.
Right. Excellent. And then the other is honor.org, I think is how it pops up. Is that right?
Yep, that's
and
them.
It's the Honor Foundation.
Yep.
And I'll put that also in the comments. So if there is anybody interested in those, feel free to take a look and tell me, what do you know about the Honor Foundation?
So the Honor Foundation was founded by Navy SEAL, and it really their focus for most of their existence has been on Special Operations Forces. So for me, coming out of my last job was with the 160th Special Ops Aviation Regiment on Fort Campbell, and so working with a lot of those folks was exposed to the Honor Foundation. Theirs is different in that they do have a virtual portion, but their more powerful one is they have a 12-week in-person intensive kind of thing where they meet. I think it's 3 times a week for like 4 hours, and you're with a cohort, so you're learning together as you go through it. And it's also, they have some folks come in to do resumes and mock interviews. They go on what's called a track, where they actually go out and visit different companies and different, industries in order for those transitioning service members to, 1, network, right? But 2, really start having that look at, hey, I heard about this company. I thought you did this, and I didn't know you also did this, because I didn't know until I came here and we actually, got to see what you do and find out, but they do say they strip it down to, hey, let's figure out what's important to you. Let's identify, and they help you figure out the scale too of the priorities and the precedence there of like, hey, okay, when you're looking for your next chapter, salary, location, culture, benefit, right? Like, you're probably not going to get all of them. So trying to figure out like which ones are more important than others to you, right? Are you really worried about making 150 grand a year, right? Because that's also going to dictate the location, right? Because you're probably not.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So they help kind of spin that part down for you. So yeah, they do some incredible work too. And then one of their big things is they have a thing that they call it the 500 cups of coffee, and so it's the networking thing where they encourage their fellows to go out and have, invite people to have a cup of coffee, and not go, hey, nice to meet you, do you have any jobs, right? But no,
Right.
Nice to meet you. Can you tell me a little bit more about your industry or about your role or about your background, and like actually get to know you, and figure out if what you do or your company may have opportunities for me. And we can get to the job part later, but now I'm just trying to get to know you and what you do, because what you do sounds interesting on paper, but I don't really know much about it. Now we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to learn more about it from you, right? And then that also leads about the 500 cups of coffee. The conversation you and I have is going to close out with a call to action for me, kind of like, what I'm asking of you. And one of those is almost always going to be, do you have any thoughts on someone else I should be speaking with? Right.
Excellent.
And kind of giving you now the chance to go, well, actually, yeah, now that we've talked and I've gotten to know you, I'm going to connect you with Jessica over here who does this thing, because I think that would interest you, and keeping that networking piece going down the road.
And I think that's huge. One of the things that we do, there's, as you know, of course, Rich LaMonica, a podcaster. There are several that are out there. And so we've started networking with those podcasters for veterans. And so if we have a guest that we feel would be a really good fit, we do a soft introduction with that guest to that host of the podcast.
Perfect.
And then let you guys make that connection and get things situated, a date, etc. that works. And there's several that are out there that I can't remember. There's one group it's a veteran run group, and basically they're getting all of those podcasters together, and they're then pushing them out to the different platforms and stuff, helping with that, instead of kind of everybody just out there on their own, kind of trying to come up with a centralized area for everybody. So, and it's on the tip of my tongue. I just can't remember it off the top of my head, but
as soon as we hang up, 8
it's
seconds
gonna
later,
right. It's gonna hit me, and I had a guest that was one of the things I don't know if I can say it properly, but I got it here. Hang on. I forgot I wrote it down. So, did you get a civilian certification for what you did in the military?
I did not. So my last gig was public affairs, and so there are a couple out there that you could pursue. There's like an associate of public relations, or association of public relations has some stuff you can do. I didn't, and honestly, for me, I think it's also it really depends on what you choose to do next, right? Like we have a lot of
Right.
conversations right now with transitioning service members about the project management professional because it's kind of a hot topic and everybody's doing, but it's one of those things where, okay, do you need it?
Right.
Right. And if you are choosing to go in that sort of field and you're going to do like engineering and stuff like that, it probably will pay off. And it may actually pay off in the way of, increased earning potential right off the bat. But, if you're, hey, I want to be a school teacher. Okay.
Right.
Is a PMP going to help you with that? Right. And so
Right.
that's something we have a lot of talks with folks too is, not all of those civilian certifications are created equal, and making sure you choose the ones, that are going to make a difference. The one really cool part and I don't know if all the services did this. I know the Army did. They removed the service obligation that was tied to a lot of those. And so the Army has this, it's called the COOL program. It's like civilian opportunities for licensing. It's an acronym for something, but basically, what that was is it helps tie you into programs that'll get you that civilian certification.
Okay.
But for years, it required you, hey, if you did that and you had 6 months left in the Army, you just added 6 more months because you used Army dollars to get that certification. All right. And so what that was doing was causing service members to not get the certification because they had
Right.
already decided I'm getting out of the Army, that part of it. But now I've actually taken an opportunity off the table. So once they took that off, we've seen a huge increase in service members that are pursuing those certifications that will help them as they're writing that next chapter and figuring out what it looks like, which I think if the military is going to offer opportunities like that, you absolutely should take advantage of them.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And that was the other question that this guest, a veteran that I had on the show, had said that, do you know, and not specifically you, but just in general for anybody who's transitioning out, do you know if there is a federal certification for what you did in the military?
Yeah, and for mine there was, and again, there's a couple different ones. There's one actually through that association that's specifically for military. So, say for instance, like in my role, if I decided I wanted to go and be a GS employee and do public affairs, for the Department of Defense and in some role anywhere, that does help because it just showcases that because that one is fairly intensive. So there's some wickets you have to go through there that really showcase that you actually know what you're doing, right? So so it's helpful if you're a hiring manager and you're looking at this and you have someone who has that and has gone through the testing and shown all the documentation that they've done these tasks and someone not. I mean, I would say personally that would be a weight. I'd go, hey, clearly you're probably more prepared to fill the role I need than the person who didn't go do that.
Right.
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 So yeah, there's definitely
So
value there.
yeah, so those are some really good points, and for those looking to transition out, right? Check those certifications.
Yeah.
Can you get them, and or at least find out if they're even available. So specifically, what is the? Are you with a 501c3? Did you start your own?
No. So right now I'm working for the state of Tennessee. So as I was transitioning out, I had an opportunity, and this goes back to the relationships and some of the volunteer work we'd done. I got asked to help with a group that was working on some stuff for the state of Tennessee, Tennessee state government specifically. And the goal being, how do we make Tennessee the destination of choice for veterans and their family members? So yeah, and so looking at it in that way, but that led to helping build out so the under the governor's office, we have a veteran fellowship program. And so as we built that out, I was fortunate to be able to serve as one of the first two fellows in the pilot phase. And then that led to being asked if I would run the program. And so, that was, as I was getting out of the military, I was already working for the state, when I was on terminal leave. And so I was very fortunate, but again, it goes back to that network and relationship part. And so now that role I have is running that veteran fellowship program, and then also serving as the chief of staff it's called the Tri-Stars and Stripes Council, but it's the governor's Armed Forces Council for the state of Tennessee. Yeah.
Excellent. Boy, that's great. I didn't
It's
realize that there was such a thing. Is it something that they publish?
Yeah,
for
yeah.
veterans?
So The Veteran Fellowship Program is designed specifically for transitioning service members, and it's a 12-month program. And so it starts in January of each year. When it's at its full capacity, we'll have 6 fellows in there. And right, this class here has 4. This is our second, really our first full class. And so we're kind of ramping it up. So we've got 4 fellows in this class. And what it is they start out in January generally as a skill bridge or a career skills program, which is an Army kind of centric thing. But they start out doing that. So they're going to be getting paid by the DoD for the first 3 to 4 months, just depending on their time frame. Once they're on terminal leave, then they switch over to a state of Tennessee employee with full pay and benefits. And for the rest of that 12-month period. But the way it's set up is it's 3 4-month phases. And the first one is really an introduction to state operations. So they get to come in. And speaking of those cups of coffee and stuff, I think most of us, when we hear state government, we immediately think politics because we don't have the experience to know any different. But being able to find out through this that, hey, there's a whole lot that state government does, no matter what state you're in.
Exactly.
And if you pick a role, that exists in state government in some department, right? And so we can try and find that. So they get to spend that first 4 months really learning about like the breadth and depth of state government. And one thing that's really cool for the access part is during that point, they're going to meet with the executive leadership team of all 23 state agencies. And there are people that work for the state for 10 years and never meet the commissioner of their department. Right. These fellows meet every commissioner in the state in the first 90 days of this program. And those conversations are based around, one, a little bit of the getting to know each other thing, but then what are the key operational goals? What are the strategic initiatives? What things are those departments doing? What are your wicked problems, right? Because the fellows are starting to think through, hey, I know my skill set and my background. I hear you talking about this thing. 1, it interests me. 2, I think I have a skill set that could help with that. And so then they have follow-on conversations to try and identify those places where they might be able to plug in. While they're doing this, they're also being hosted by an agency and doing a little bit of project work to start being able to showcase what they can do, as well as build out that civilian resume. Because we have we do a lot of the crosswalk thing of like, here's your title in the military, here's what it means in the but now you're actually doing some work, right? So that you can go, hey, I've done this on the civilian side, and here's my example of it. But that phase leads into their second phase, which is where those conversations from the interactions they have with the senior leadership teams now create opportunities for them to do projects with the departments. And they generally work with about 3 departments each. But it's huge exploratory kind of thing that most veterans don't get, right? Like one of our guys, he's working with our Commerce and Insurance Department, doing some stuff with volunteer firefighters and training. He's working with Department of Corrections on some training pipeline stuff for corrections officers and recruiting. He's working with our Agriculture Department on things around foresters and stuff like that. So you think like that's just a huge difference in 3 different areas, but it's given him the chance to try out 3 different places and 3 different types of work, right? While there's really not a huge risk level for him, right? Because for him, it's hey, just do the work, showcase what you can do, right? And earn a place on the team, basically. And that's what we tell the fellows when they come in is we're going to open the door with this program. And when you come in the building, now it's up to you, right? You can stay on the ground floor and be happy with an entry-level place, right? Or you can hop on the elevator and ride up to the 6th floor, like whatever, right? But we've opened the door for you to do that based on the effort you put into it, right? If you want to, kind of do it halfway, well, then that's the outcome you're going to get. But if you bust your tail, you're probably going to have a pretty good offer at the end of this 12 months, right? Doing some work that is impactful, to the citizens of Tennessee. And so, so that second phase, when they lead into their third one, the third one is they've whittled it down to 1 department. They kind of take a little bit more of a leading role in that work. And it's a place where the department thinks they fit. The fellow thinks they fit. There's a job opportunity at the end. And we talk to the departments too about that. We say, hey, like, as part of this process, we need to know that you have a role available, right? You don't have to guarantee anything or what that role might be, but we need to know, like if you're a 500 person agency, that you've got a few openings available and you can try and plug this person into, right? If you don't have any jobs, then, we're going to point the fellow someplace else because the goal of this is to help them find a full-time employment opportunity at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah. And one really cool part of the whole program is the fact that you mentioned tribe earlier, and that's something we talk a lot about, is being able to go, all right, in the military, I was serving the nation. Now my purpose is serving the citizens of the state of Tennessee, right? It's a very easy kind of transition for me to still feel like the work I do has purpose, right? And I don't lose that portion of my identity when I take off my uniform for the last time.
Right. I think it's a great thing that they begun and that you're involved in, because it's never easy, right? I mean, the goal of what we do in having you as veterans come on, talk about your stories and such, is to help veterans recognize, one, they're not alone in how they
Absolutely.
think, that there's all sorts of different resources for them to tap into. Maybe this didn't work, but something else that they hear might work better for them and they give it a shot. And so it makes me happy to hear just how much, you know, a lot of times veterans or those transitioning out, right? They've had their fair share of government.
Mhm.
And so to hear the positive side of things, this is still government run in the
Right.
sense it's the state of Tennessee, but it sounds very proactive, which I like. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to find are those proactive resources.
Yes.
And so I commend you for that. Jason says that that is an incredible asset for them as well. So yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, and especially when you mentioned the proactive part, the other part of this role, the Tri-Stars and Stripes Council, essentially, and you and I, when we did our pre-conversation here, we talked a little bit about resource availability and things. So that's something that we're focusing heavily on with the council, is not only resource access, but the acknowledgement. And I think we get caught up a lot when we start talking about suicide prevention with the moment of crisis kind of care, which is incredibly important, but we don't talk enough about getting left of the moment of crisis and figuring out how we can get you the things you need early on. And so we focus a lot on worthwhile employment, education attainment, quality of life for your family, right? All these things that the state can play a role in helping achieve, because those are all the things that lead to the stressors that put you in the moment of crisis where you're considering something drastic. All right. So if we're able to get out in front and help you do things like, hey, guess what? If you've got a job that you enjoy and pays enough for you to support your family, like, you're probably not experiencing the stress or getting into fights with your spouse, whatever, over finances, right? It might be other things, right? But it might be over,
Well, yeah, right.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, but that's life, right? But
exactly.
things like that can help with that, right? If you're getting out and you figure out, I'm going to do this thing, but there's an education component I need, and we're helping you attain that, right? Now
Right.
you're able to get in that field that you really thought interested you, but you thought was closed off, right? So there's so many things when you get there, and it's funny. There's a Desmond Tutu quote I saw years ago, and it's perfect for this. And the quote is, "We focus so much on pulling the man out of the river instead of going upriver and figuring out why the man fell in the river in the first place." Right? And I think it's perfect for this of, hey, yes, we need to pull the veteran out of the river when we're at that point, but daggone, let's go upstream and figure out, what caused you to fall in the water, right? And if we can help solve those problems and you never get in the water, right, now you don't need all those other resources in the moment of crisis, right? And we can solve that. And there's so many things, that have positive side effects to that, right? Because again, if you stop me from falling in the water, I'm probably helping someone else not fall in the water, right? So there's the ripple effect there is so powerful. So that's what we're focused heavily on, is that yes, suicide prevention is a critical thing in the veteran community right now, but the proactive thing is something we're not doing enough of, right? And trying to get out in front of all these stressors. We wait until you're in the moment of crisis and then go, okay, let me get your resources. Well, man, if you'd helped me find housing 3 months ago, I wouldn't have been at the point where I'm now at the hospital needing this, right? When I came asking about that help, you kind of gave me the Heisman, right? Like, instead of helping me then. So,
This is so DJ Play Nice said, so he's got the quote. There comes a point where we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in.
There it is.
Desmond Tutu. Thank you, DJ.
I
And
love
that
it.
is very profound and makes a lot of sense to me. And so, um, one, for those of you out in the chats, if you have some questions for Chris, go ahead and put those in the comments and we will get to those. So, I have to say, um, I can't imagine that this program is cheap. And so I have to commend the governor for, you know, allowing and budgeting, for this because to me, it's really important. I mean, as veterans, you've sacrificed your family and your livelihood or what have you. You've sacrificed so much, and I think that for something like this is kind of the least that we can do. I think
Yeah.
that's I can't say I don't know. Do other states have something like this similar? Are you
This
aware of?
this is the first one in the nation,
Okay.
and we're sharing the playbook with some other states. I know Kentucky's had some discussions about it. One thing that we're very fortunate about in Tennessee is the fact that Fort Campbell is 45 minutes from downtown Nashville, right? And
Mhm.
so that's a huge opportunity that not a lot of states have, right? And that's like Kentucky, for example. That's going to be part of their challenge is the geographical challenge of, hey, it's 3 hours from Fort Campbell to Frankfurt up to there, right? So it's very interesting. Yeah, and absolutely, I saw Jason's comment you put up there, but yeah, we're
Mhm.
always open for help. We get a lot of folks that offer to help there, and it's amazing. Because one thing that we try and do as well with the veteran fellows is fully acknowledge that, hey, you know what, state work may not not may not, it's not going to be right for everyone, right?
Right.
So we may have
Exactly.
people in there that do this for, they might complete the whole program and go, you know what, doesn't really fit what I wanted, doesn't fit.
Right.
Okay, so what we try hard to do is make sure that we're keeping them tied in to some other opportunities, because the last thing that I personally want to do is have someone where, hey, this is your only option. If this option doesn't work out, now we're the people that put you in that spot where you're falling in the river, right? Like, and so
Exactly.
how do we
Or
help?
we're pushing them in the river, one of the
Yeah,
two, right?
yeah, yeah. So we keep them tied in with networking opportunities. Some of the private companies out there, other nonprofits, and really we want them to keep growing as they go through this, so they have a better experience and a higher chance of a successful transition. And obviously that's a subjective kind of term, right? But they do have a higher chance of it going well for them and their family. And we want you to be a state of Tennessee employee, but we acknowledge that that may not be the case. But if you stay in the Tennessee workforce, right, and make a difference there, that's still a win for the state of Tennessee, right? And so we'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, for the state of Tennessee or any state for that matter, they want people who are going to be there for a long time because it costs money to
Oh,
train.
yeah.
And so, if you have a high turnover, obviously, it costs a lot of money. So, to be able to
Absolutely.
train the right person, knowing that they're happy with where they're at and what they're doing makes a huge difference.
Yes.
So, yeah, I commend you guys and thank you very much for sharing that. Um,
Well, I appreciate and it's funny you mentioned the governor. So the General Assembly is that actually did the budget piece for that to help out. So obviously with the governor's support, but yeah,
right,
it's been interesting, and I think governor specifically, one of his things that he looks at in the state is, he's term limited, so he's in his last term. He's got a couple of years left, but he understands, and he says this all the time. But the value that our veteran and military spouse community bring to the workforce, and so it's one of those things where we're not going to solve. We being the veteran community, we're not going to solve the workforce need of the state of Tennessee because it's in the hundreds of thousands,
right.
but we're going to bring high quality inputs into it, right? And have that thing. So that's where we look at it too. Is there's so many opportunities for veterans in the state to get good jobs. So
And
anything we
secure
can do to help with
jobs
that.
too.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
other thing. Are, state jobs for the most part are secure jobs.
absolutely. Yeah,
you know.
good benefits, right? And that's one
Mhm.
thing, like this, the state, and state of Tennessee just redid in the last year the compensation rules to try and catch up a little bit, but they also acknowledge, hey, we're never going to be able to pay the same amount that like HCA Healthcare, a huge healthcare company, they're going to be able to pay more than the state. It's just the
Right.
realities of how the numbers work. Um, so what the state does in return is they do a lot to try and tie into benefits, right? And the benefits package is in there. And as a veteran coming in, there's a hiring preference in the state of Tennessee. So like guaranteed almost, that you're at least in the interview process for those
Right.
roles, as long as you meet all the qualifications for it. But then, if you do get hired by the state, there's additional paid time off, for example, as a thank you kind of for your military service as you come in. So there's a lot of things that they've done just to try and make the environment more welcoming and attractive to the veteran population when we're looking at what that next piece looks like for us.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes. I really am. So we'll definitely be in contact.
Yeah.
Let's see, Jim says amazing program and thank you again for your service and continuing to be a leader for others. Bravo. Again, I'm not seeing any questions out there just yet. So, any words of wisdom for those who might be considering going into the military?
Yeah. I mean, it's just funny 'cause, and again, I wish I'd coined this term, but I heard it somewhere else. I don't remember where, but it's important to think about what you hope to get out of your military
Mhm.
service, right? Like the idea of just doing it for the patriotism sounds really good on paper, but that's only going to get you so far when the days get tough, right? And so understanding what your goals are for coming in. But the
Right.
term is, I heard someone call the military a life accelerator, right? And
Dang.
yeah, I love that thought of, hey, if you and I are both 19 years old and we choose different paths, right? It's very unlikely that you're going to get more out of your path than I'm going to get out of my military service path, right? I'm going to get some training, I'm going to get life experience, a lot of maturity. I'm probably going to interact with other cultures. And I don't mean going out of the country, but even just in the military itself,
Yeah.
like the different ethnicities and cultures that I'm going to be exposed to, through the people on my left and right. Just all those things are things that you're probably not going to get outside of the military. So acknowledging that and taking advantage of that, understanding that, hey, these are things that are going to be very good things for me over the period of my life, right? And thinking about the long game, right? Which I
Right.
get, again, go back to that 19-year-old example. You're not thinking about the long game, but it can absolutely be a huge benefit to you, and you'd be amazed at the number of companies that recognize the value of military service, and not based on what your job was in the military, strictly based on what you bring with you as you come out.
Right.
Especially if you stay in a little bit and you become a non-commissioned officer, if you join the military as an officer, things like leadership experience, right? Like that's something that you're never getting a job based on the fact that you say, hey, I've got leadership experience. That's great. But what I mean by that is, like NCOs in the Army, we have an NCO academy for every branch in the Army. And so when you make certain ranks, you go to courses that teach a little bit of technical stuff in the job, but a lot of
Right.
leadership principles, mentorship, things like that. And again, if you have someone who's been in 10 years and is a mid-level manager, if you will, right, in the Army, like that same person on the civilian side, they don't have anyone investing in them in that way. Right.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So thinking through that way of like, hey, what am I gaining from this military service outside of the fact that I served my country and I was a part of something bigger than myself? But I'm bringing a lot of stuff back with me when I look at whatever my next chapter might look at. And again, whether I do 4 years or 24 years, right? Like I'm gaining a whole lot from this service. And I think as a whole, the services don't do a really good job of expressing that. We try and get flashy and here's things blowing up and here's fancy graphics, and we do less about, hey, let me talk to you about what this could mean to you
Right.
later in life, right, from what you're going to get here. And I mean, that's a part of it, that life accelerator part. I mean, it sets you up in a way that just there aren't many other places that do.
Yeah, I think that that's a really fair point because I mean, teamwork, right? Working in controlled environments or non-controlled environments, depending upon whether you're combat or not, and um, working with other people, working, um, it just depends on obviously what your job function
Right,
is in the
right.
military. But yeah, I mean, the discipline alone
Yeah,
that you have to have when you're in the military, that's instilled in every branch for every military individual, that's such a positive that, and nowadays you don't necessarily see that,
right.
right? So, and maturity. I mean, not always, right? You got the jokers.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You got the jokers, but for the most part, right? They know what needs to be done, when it needs to be done. They're on the ball when it comes to those kinds
Yeah,
of things, but they still, know how to have fun. So,
yeah.
I think some great things are coming to the state of Tennessee. So I'm really excited, as I said, to hear that. Let's see. Angry Sarge, welcome. Thank you. And uh, glad you could pop in. Let's see. Jim says on job apps, there are about 6 military questions now. Protected, previous, current, and others. Employers definitely acknowledge and appreciate the training, teamwork, discipline. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, Jim.
Yeah, and there's been a big push, and this isn't just state of Tennessee, but it's been a big push in the hiring thing over really over the last couple of years, with recruiters doing a higher focus on attributes over skills, because it's one of the things like, hey, I need you to be able to to work a line in here and put this widget on this on this piece, or I can teach anybody to do that, right?
Right.
But I can't teach that person to bring all the attributes that you bring with you from your military service, right? Like that teamwork piece, the discipline, the attention to detail, right? Like, hey, the widget goes on a certain way, right? And some people that man out for service are like, oh, whatever, I'll put it on any way I want. Well, you put it on any way you want means the next person in line has to either fix your job or the thing doesn't work right, right? And we've learned that, like, hey, it goes on a certain way. That's the only way it happens. And when it leaves
Yes.
my hands, it's going to be right, And so
Exactly.
like, it
Exactly.
seems like a simple concept, but it's something that for us has become a really big deal, because again, no matter what your job was in the military, there were pieces of that you have to get it right. So obviously dating myself here, not a surprise after this conversation, but starting out in in the early to mid 90s as a crew chief, so we had a paper logbook for our aircraft, and after each flight you had to close it out and you had to update things, and after so many flights it had to completely be redone in order to really kind of take away a lot of the fluff from 100 different engines in there, but keep certain things at the front. But I had an instructor, and he had a red pen, and this is a cardstock piece, 3 entries front and back. And once he found a mistake, he would just circle it with the red pen, which means you now have to rewrite all 6 of those entries. And this is by hand. There's no autofill, right? So you learn quickly to pay attention to what you're doing.
That's
or you're
right.
gonna do it again.
That's
So,
right.
yeah.
Angry Sarge, to your point there, Chris, you and I both know it's the small details that can get you killed. So that's why the small things really mattered. Exactly. Yep. And details really make a difference
Yeah, absolutely.
in a lot of things. So especially, potentially life or death. So it's absolutely right and absolutely key. So Chris, I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time to come on tonight. And if you want to hang on and stay with me, I think unless anybody has anything else they want to add in the chats, we're going to go ahead and get ready to sign off. So everybody, thank you. I really appreciate y'all coming out tonight and joining the conversation. So we are, I think, about out. Let's see. Thank you again. And please thank your wife for her service as well. And Killian says, raw.
Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate the interaction with everyone. It's awesome.
Absolutely. Angry Sarge says, thank you for your service and doing the show. So we're all very, very thankful for that. And I'll definitely be getting some more information from you here in a few minutes, because I want to make sure that I get all of those resources and names put out there for everybody. So, all right, everybody, y'all have a wonderful night. Thank you very much for joining tonight. And we will see you next Sunday.